Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Denise and I talk about fascinating cases that have fascinated me my whole life, or at least until I first heard of them. And today's a good example. About 2 years ago, I was watching a Netflix special and it was called Files of the Unexplained. And one of the stories concerned the Yuba County Five. And I had never heard of that before. And so as soon as I did, I was hooked. I was listening to podcasts and I was watching videos and I even bought a book about the case. Basically, five men, all with some sort of mental disability, went to a basketball game. They took a wrong turn and they died. And I know that sounds dramatic, but basically it's true. So let's talk about the case of the Yuba County Five, which all happened in Yuba County in Northern California in February of 1978. These are the five men we're going to be talking about. We have Gary Mathias, and he was 25 at the time of the incident. He was in the Army for a while, but he got too involved with drugs, and he was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia, so he was discharged from the Army. He is perhaps the most troubled of the men we're going to be talking about. He was arrested twice for assault, and he spent a lot of time in the VA hospital, but with medication, the proper medication, he was very stable dealing with schizophrenia. We have Jackie Hewitt, who is 24 and the youngest of the group. He lived on a farm with his family, and he was perhaps the most challenged of the group of men. He couldn't read or write, and he relied heavily on his family. And he also relied on his best friend, who was Ted Weir. He is 32, lives with his family as well, but he couldn't make proper choices in life, his family would say. For example, he couldn't understand why you had to stop at a stop sign, or why if you waved at some people, sometimes they didn't wave back. Or even one time his house was on fire and he was laying in bed and he didn't want to get up because he needed to be rested for work the next day. So he didn't have common sense and didn't know how to make proper life choices. We also have Jack Madruga, who was 30 years old and also spent some time in the military in Vietnam. He had a prized possession. It was his 1969 Mercury Montego, and he took meticulous care of it. It's the vehicle the boys mostly rode around in. And we have Bill Sterling, finally. He was 29, very religious, and he liked to read up on people with disabilities. He hated the cold and snow. And I called them the boys because collectively the parents called them the boys because they did everything together and they were great friends. So I'll go back and forth calling them the men and the boys. Now, the men were on the Gateway Gators basketball team, and the Gateway was part of a program that was supported for people with disabilities. It was kind of a safe house for them. People with disabilities could go there and get training for jobs, and the place also did a lot of treatment for different mental conditions. And the boys were starting a tournament on February 25th for the basketball game. They were very excited about this game because the winner of the tournament got to go to Los Angeles for a week, all paid expenses. And they were so excited that they laid out their uniforms the night before the game. That would be the 24th. And that's the night also they decided they were going to drive up to Chico and watch the UC Davis men's basketball game. So they all piled into the Mercury Montego and took the 50-mile drive up to Chico, California. They watched the game, and after the game, they went to a convenience store where they bought a bunch of snacks, some milk and candy and some soda and some chips. And the clerk remembers them distinctively because it was closing time, and she had to wait for them to make their choices and finish wrapping up before she could close the store. And that was the last known confirmed sighting of the Yuba County Five. The boys never came home. The parents started to get worried, and they started to call each other and say, have you heard from so-and-so? Where have they been home? Are they at your house? And they didn't have any answers. The next morning, they called the police. And investigators took the route that the boys would have taken from Yuba City to Chico, and they found absolutely nothing. A couple days later, a forest ranger found a car abandoned on a forest road in the Plumas National Forest. And it was an abandoned car, and it was the Mercury Montego. The car was found unlocked, there were no keys in sight, and a window was rolled down. There was no sign of the boys, but signs that they were in the car because they found remnants of the wrappers and the candy and the milk that they had from the convenience store. The location of the car was 70 miles away from where the boys were supposed to be. From Chico down to Yuba City, they had taken a drastic wrong turn. The road that they were on was winding and it was full of snow and at a high elevation. And the boys only had on light jackets. They were not equipped for the snowy conditions. Why did the boys drive up there? Where were they? The car was stuck in the snow, but it was nothing that 5 healthy men could not have pushed free. Authorities ended up hot-wiring the car to see that it still had a quarter tank of gas. It was a big mystery that was forming. Authorities were searching the area. They looked around with snowmobiles, with sniffer dogs, and even a helicopter, and there was no sign of the boys anywhere, no footprints, but that could be because there was constantly snow falling. There were blizzard conditions that were happening, and after 10 days, the search had to be called off. But that's when a man came forward with a bizarre story. It was Joseph Shones, and he said he had been on that same road the same night as the Yuba County Five. He said he was going up there, up the mountain road, to check on a cabin he owned, but his car also got stuck in the snow. And he said he started to feel like he was having a heart attack, and he vomited outside of the car. All of this has been confirmed. He indeed had a heart attack, and the authorities did find vomit. He then said a car pulled up behind him. He could see the headlights, and a bunch of people got out. He said it looked like some men and even a woman holding a baby, but he couldn't tell for sure. He called for them. He called to them for help, but as soon as he did, they got quiet and they disappeared. And so he waited in his car. He put the heat on for a little bit, and he waited until daylight, and that's when he decided he felt a little better, and he was going to walk back down the mountain road 8 miles to a lodge that was at the base. What exactly did Joseph Shones see? Was there a woman there with a baby? Were these the 5 Yuba County men that everyone was looking for? Joseph Shones is wondering if maybe he imagined the whole thing. But when he did walk down that mountain road, he did see the car in the morning. A Mercury Montego was there. So at one point, he did see the Yuba County Five. But where they went, no one will know. And it took a while longer for more answers to come in. After the snow melt, actually. On June 4th, some motorcyclists were riding through the Plumas National Forest, and they came across a forest trailer, and they noticed a broken window, and they thought they would go investigate. And as they got closer to the trailer, they noticed a horrible stench, and when they went inside, they made a horrible discovery. It was Ted Weir, and he was laying on a bed covered tightly in linens, in sheets, and his legs were exposed from the knees down that showed gangrene forming and severe frostbite. He was even missing a few toes. When Ted Weir's body was found, he was emaciated. He had weighed about 200 pounds before this all started, and he was down to about 100 pounds. And he had about 2 to 3 months of beard growth coming in, which means he had been alive in that trailer for 2 to 3 months after they disappeared from the car. Investigators came to that area and they scoured around, and eventually they found the remains of Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jackie Hewitt. It makes you wonder why this area wasn't searched in the first place. Maybe authorities thought it was just too far, 20 miles from where the car was located, and there's no way the boys could have made it that far in the clothing that they were wearing and the conditions that were going on. It was clear that animals had kind of scattered the remains. A lot of it was just bones left, but the clothing and the shoes were identified. And about a quarter mile north of the trailer, authorities found blankets and a rusted flashlight. Did those belong to Gary Mathias? Did he take them from the trailer and try and go for help? We don't have all the answers. So finding the remains was some closure for the families. Very sad, but so many questions were left behind. Why did the boys leave the car, which had plenty of gas and could have kept them warm? Why didn't they just turn the car around if they knew they had taken a wrong turn? And where, most importantly, at this point was Gary Mathias? Now, they did find Gary's tennis shoes in the trailer, and Bill Weir's shoes were missing. So at some point, Gary was in that trailer, and he maybe thought that Ted's shoes were better equipped for the snowy conditions, and he just had tennis shoes, so he swapped them out. Jack Madruga also took meticulous care of his car. He would not have left it, his family said, with the windows down and unlocked. And whoever drove up that forest road had to drive with extreme care because authorities looked and there was no damage underneath the car. The questions are, why did they not just walk back down the hill, the same way that Joseph Shones walked back down to that lodge. It seemed a snowcat had at one point made a path along the road, and so it was less deep. Did the boys just decide that they were going to follow that path? And if so, why? Where did they think they were going? And what exactly did Joseph Shones see that night? At one point, he told authorities not only did he see the first set of headlights, that at some point, a pickup truck pulled up behind that car. And in that car, more people got out, but they had flashlights. And when he called for help, the flashlights turned off and they got very quiet. Ted Weir's mother said the boys were so giving that if somebody had called for help, they would have helped them. But Joseph Shones would go on to say that he was kind of delirious and in a lot of pain, and he doesn't really know what he saw. He knows he saw the one car, most likely because it was there, but whether or not he saw a woman with a baby or another car pull up behind the Montego, he's just not sure. Other witnesses came forward as well. A woman from Brownsville at a convenience store said she saw a red pickup truck with the Yuba County Five pull up to her store, come in and buy snacks. She said the boys had big wide eyes and big facial expressions, and she does remember them from the flyers that were being distributed at the time about the missing boys. And the store owner did back up her story. The investigators looked into the story, but they couldn't find any answers leading to anywhere else. Besides that, if the boys were there in Brownsville, were they there against their will? Was someone holding them in the car? And they had to miss their basketball game then. And they were so excited about the basketball game. They would not have missed it if they had any choice in the matter. And then also, they would have had to be in that store and then go back to the place in the Plumas National Forest where they eventually died. It just didn't make any sense. The investigation continued. In the trailer where they found Bill Weir's body was also found 30 opened cans of food that had been eaten, and they had been opened with a P-38 military can opener. And there's only 2 people in the group that would know how to use that, and that was Bill Sterling and Gary Mathias. But in the trailer, they also found a propane heater that hadn't been used, lots of paperbacks and lots of paper that could have been used to start a fire, and enough food that would have lasted all 5 boys a whole year. Why was none of the other food touched? The families of the boys insist that foul play was going on, that something or someone chased those boys up that mountain road and forced them to abandon the car. So let's talk about some theories. Was it all an accident? Did the boys take a wrong turn and go up the mountain road? I don't think that's true, because I think they would have known enough to just stop and turn around the car. And if they were stuck, they would have pushed it out and they would have moved on. The Gateway Project was actually susceptible to a lot of violence. There was a fire that was started at the building, at the project center. There was also bomb threats, and people were just hostile to the Gateway projects. And some people think that maybe someone recognized the boys from the Gateway projects and they bullied them, chased them up the mountain and chased them away from the car into the snow. That is one theory, that somebody had it against these boys and against the Gateway projects. A lot of people want to take a closer look at Gary Mathias. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia, but he was on his medication and he was stable when he was. But if he was off his medication, he would be aggressive and violent, and he would act out. Remember, he had been arrested for assault, and he had somewhat of a violent, volatile history. He actually had told some people before the event that he was going to disappear. Now, Gary had some friends in Forbestown, which was kind of at the base of the mountain. And if he wanted to stop in there and the boys made a wrong turn, they would have continued up the mountain. But those friends say they haven't heard from Gary Mathias in over a year. And again, if they realized it was a wrong turn, they probably would have just flipped around before it was too late and the car got too stuck. Family members would say the 4 boys were afraid of Gary Mathias and they really didn't like hanging around with him. Even on the night they went to Chico to watch the basketball game, they didn't want him to go, but they didn't know how to say no. So did Gary Mathias coax the boys into going up that mountain road, saying they were going on some sort of adventure and really he wanted to disappear? Did somebody run into Gary Mathias and the boys when they were at the game or at the convenience store? Somebody who didn't like Gary Mathias because he had a troubled past. Did those people run the boys up the mountain road and into the snow? Did they take Gary Mathias away from the scene, maybe in a red pickup truck, the same one that Joseph Shones had seen or the woman in Brownsville had seen? We don't know. By this time, Gary Mathias would have been off his medication and becoming unstable, so authorities checked in with hospitals to see if he checked himself in or if somebody else did. Jack Madruga's niece said that she saw Gary Mathias at a bar. They made eye contact and he took off. But to this day, no remains of his have been found. So, did the boys go up the mountain on their own or were they forced? That is the question. I don't think it was an accident because I think they would have rectified the situation. The families to this day believed someone forced those boys up the mountain. So what do I think happened? I think that the answers lie in Gary Mathias. I don't think the boys were necessarily forced up that road. I think it was his idea. He wanted to go up that road for some reason. Maybe he was going to play a prank or he was trying to tell the boys this would be fun. Whatever happened, I think that Gary Mathias was in that trailer. His tennis shoes were there and Bill Weir's shoes were gone. Somebody opened up those cans of food with the P-38 military can opener. We have Bill Sterling and Jack Madruga's remains found kind of far away from the trailer. So either they made it to the trailer and went back to the car, or they never made it to the trailer at all. Jackie Hewitt might have made it to the trailer because his remains were found closer. I think for sure it was Bill Weir and it was Gary Mathias in the trailer. And I think that Gary put Bill on that bed and wrapped him tightly in sheets. And for a while, he was feeding them with food with the can opener and the food that was eaten. But again, there was a lot of more food that could have been eaten. And there was a propane heater that could have been used to keep the place warm, but it wasn't. So I think what happened was Gary Mathias took blankets and Ted's shoes and a flashlight, and he was going to go for help. I don't think he wanted to hurt his friends. And at that point, I think Ted on his own couldn't get up, couldn't help the situation at all, and certainly couldn't feed himself. And he ended up dying from starvation and from hypothermia. Why does this case fascinate me so much? I think it's because of all the questions. Why did they go up the mountain road? Why did they leave the car? What did Joseph Shones really see? What was going on in the trailer? Why didn't they eat more food? Where is Gary Mathias? There's just so many questions. And I'm so stumped by the fact that Gary has never been found. And the mystery just deepens. I did buy a book about the case, and it's called Out of Bounds: What Happened to the Yuba County Five by Drew Hurst Beeson. And it was a good book. It talks about all the theories that are out there, and it also interviews some family members who have some insight into the boys and their lives that they lived and their friendship and what happened to them on that day. And it was precious, the friendship they had. And it's sad to this day that we don't have answers, but I will say this. I believe if Gary Mathias had not gotten into that car that night, I believe the boys would have played in that tournament, and I think they might be alive today. What do you think? Leave me some feedback. I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching, too. Like and subscribe if you can, and I'll be dropping more videos soon, so I'll be talking to you again. Thanks a lot.